Hello, I'm Julie Cole. This week we have the opportunity to review and analyze weather data from Fairbanks and Sandpoint during the weeks of January 25th through February 1st, 2016, and March 20th through the 28th of 2016. Sandpoint is located in the Aleutians at approximately 55 degrees north and 160 degrees west. Fairbanks in the interior of Alaska is about 64 degrees north and 147 degrees west, a large enough latitudinal difference along with the proximity to the ocean to have completely different weather patterns and experience different systems. The differences between maritime and continental climates are very apparent in the data between Sandpoint and Fairbanks. The maritime climate of Sandpoint helps it maintain a steady pattern as opposed to the often severe fluctuations of Fairbanks. And a quick review of each location will illustrate these differences. Temperatures in Sandpoint in January saw a range of only just over 10 degrees, staying between 34 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. By comparing the three charts, the relationships are clear. The temperature and pressure, which range from a strong low of 960 millibars to 1,005 millibars, and the relative humidity follow basically the same pattern. March shows similar stability, but the pressure range is higher generally. It ranges from 990 millibars to about 1,008 millibars. The temperatures were more in line with climatology temperatures ranging from 25 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and the dew point and relative humidity were coming together with pretty high ranges of relative humidity between 70 and 100%, which tells us there was quite a bit of moisture in the air, obviously. One significant difference that we can observe in January is that with an increase in pressure in Sandpoint, a corresponding rise in temperature occurs. We see that increase there, and then the temperature follows. In Fairbanks, on the other hand, if there is a rise in pressure in January, the temperature is going to go down, and vice versa, as we see was the case. As the pressure dropped in the middle of the week, the temperature went up, and then as it steadily increased and then got to that high of about 1,015 millibars, the temperature immediately dropped off. January in Fairbanks shows temperatures much higher than climatology for much of the week. Temperatures ranged from minus 15 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but only 2 days were below the climatology temperatures. This corresponds exactly with the pressure pattern in this continental climate as the pressure dipped down ultimately to 974 millibars Wednesday night. The temperature was the highest at 28 degrees Fahrenheit due to the fact that the low pressure provided a cloud cover that insulated the interior. The dew point matches almost exactly the temperature chart, reaching the relative humidity range of between 70 and 100% 5 days of the week. A quick look at the weather map shows those pressure differences. At the beginning of the week on Monday, we see that low settled out here in the Aleutians, which is also influencing the interior, but some scattered clouds, not a full cloud cover, so the temperatures are relatively lower. By Thursday, that low has pushed up into the interior, and we see the cloud associated with that. The pressure has gone down, and the temperature has gone up. And then by Sunday, as that low has moved off to the west, and the strong high out in Canada that's pushing westward, influencing the interior, the temperature drops dramatically as that high pressure system moves in. Fairbanks in March saw a much more stable pressure pattern ranging only from 1,000 millibars to 1,015 millibars. At this point of the year, the fluctuation in temperature with a range of about 50 degrees, between 3 and 53 degrees Fahrenheit, was due primarily to the return of the sun, which creates the diurnal up and down. But we can still see that the general pattern corresponds with the pressure as well as the relative humidity. The relative humidity pattern is just opposite of the temperature pattern, which is what we expect as the sun warms the day and the temperature rises. And at the same time, the relative humidity is going down, being highest between 90 and 100% in the morning when the temperature is coldest, and then dropping throughout the day. The dew point also is similar to the temperature pattern, showing more moisture in the air with the low pressure systems that moved into the interior. And a quick look at the satellite images On Sunday of March 20th, there's a pretty good high going on in the interior with a low, a weak low out in the Aleutians, not too strong of winds. And by Tuesday, that low in the Aleutians is really developing, but it's still clear in the interior. With the clear skies, we see the variation in the daily temperatures. And then by Sunday, as that low has developed and is influencing the interior a little bit more, there's low up here, we see that the pressure is pretty stable, has risen a little bit, and the temperatures have stabilized as well, not dropping as much in night since there's a cloud coverage. Temperatures in Sandpoint in January were most often above climatology. From the weather maps and satellite images, we can relate the higher temperatures with clearer skies, particularly towards the end of the week before the low took over the area. So we'll take a quick look at that. On January, we see that in Sandpoint there's quite a bit of cloud coverage with the low that's out there. By Thursday, there's clearer skies out there over Sandpoint in the Aleutians, and that's where the pressure has increased and the temperature begins to increase with that high as well. And by Sunday, it has peaked. There's a low pressure system again covering the Aleutians. The pressure has dropped off, and then we see that the temperature drops off in correspondence with that. In March in Sandpoint, there's a similar situation where the end of the week cleared off before another low came in, and that clearing was associated with warmer temperatures. As we see here, the low cleared off, temperature went up, and the pressure went up, and temperature increased as well. And looking at the satellite images, we see that there's low pressure out here in the Aleutians over Sandpoint with clouds associated with that and water vapor in the air. By Tuesday, that strong low out here in the Aleutians is going to come up and influence the Aleutians and Sandpoint and push the pressure down, and the temperatures will start rising. And by Sunday, we see that low pressure system there, it eventually hit its peak and then dropped down. There's that low right there, and then associated with that is the rise in temperature in Sandpoint. Fairbanks, on the other hand, was the opposite. In January, as the week progressed and became clearer with a high that developed, the temperatures dropped. There was initial warming throughout the first few days while the low settled in and the clouds helped to retain that heat. Here in Fairbanks, we see that there's some scattered clouds in the beginning of the week, giving Fairbanks a relatively moderate temperature. By Thursday, it has developed, that low has developed. We see that the clouds, there's good cloud coverage in Fairbanks. Therefore, the temperature has increased. We see the drop in pressure. And then Sunday, there was that high coming in from Canada, and it's clearing. And here we see really well in the infrared that it's clearing, and the pressure increases and the temperature drops. March has a little different story in Fairbanks. The beginning of the week sees clearing with fluctuating temperatures, and then as the low moves in, the temperatures stabilize some as the clouds maintain those temperatures more through the night. The maximums are similar throughout the week, mostly in the 40s, but the minimums are much lower Sunday through Thursday, getting down to between 3 and 13 degrees Fahrenheit as the temperature drops at night without the cloud cover. The higher sun in March allows for much more warming during the day in Fairbanks, so with clear skies, we experience a much stronger diurnal fluctuation. And here in the satellite images, we see that correspondence. There's some cloudiness in the Fairbanks area at the beginning of the week. We see that there with a moderately high pressure system there. But by Tuesday, that low is developing down in the Aleutians, but there's some high pressure there right in the interior, some clearing skies. Those clearing skies correspond with the sun warming it in the day and then letting it drop, the temperatures drop down at night as it maintains clear sky. And then by Sunday, again, as that low pressure system has pushed up, there's cloudiness again in the interior. So there's more stable conditions. The days are not quite as warm, but the nights are significantly warmer than they would be if there was no cloud cover. As we look for patterns reflected in temperature, pressure, and humidity combined, two main occurrences are obvious, both in January, one in Sandpoint and the other in Fairbanks. In Sandpoint, there's a marked difference heading into the weekend as a strong low pressure system blows in, and we see the pressure readings drop from 1,000 millibars to 985 millibars, and the temperatures follow, while that low brings with it the moisture that we see in the dew point and relative humidity. And that same weekend in the interior, a significant high of 1,021 millibars has settled in, pushing off the clouds. And we see that rise in pressure and with it the accompanying drop in temperature because it's January and not March. And with that, those changes, the corresponding drop in dew point as well. From the data collected, there seem to be definite wind patterns in Alaska. If the winds are southerly, as we see on January 31st, they are moving across the water and picking up moisture as they come north towards land. The low pressure systems and clouds are generally associated with these winds. Northerly winds tend to be associated with high pressure systems, as we see here on the 31st of January. Those highs are keeping the skies clear and colder in the interior. And this actually is in direct relation to the prevailing winds. The polar easterlies and the polar cell create high pressure systems, and those winds and pressures collide with the westerlies, often creating the storms that occur at those latitudes with the low pressure systems. And that also just happens to be the latitudes of southern Alaska. Chinook winds also occur in Alaska as warm air comes in from the Gulf and rises up over the mountain ranges, creating more moisture as it rises and then flows over the interior with warm, dry air. If the prevailing winds were different, the interior may be warmer, as warmer air could push further north, or temperatures could be colder further south if the polar cell were extended to lower latitude. Typically, Fairbanks experiences some of its most cold extreme in the late January when the Siberian highs move across the state. Winds would be coming from the north, pushing cold, dry, dense air through the interior. The high pressure would keep clouds pushed off, thus allowing the warmth from the day to be totally dispelled during the night. The greater the temperature differences, the greater the disparity between relative humidity and dew point, which we observe in Fairbanks. This allows for a stronger diurnal cycle of warming and cooling from day to night. This is evident in both January and March. The warmer temperatures this past year were partly the result of El Niño effects, southerly winds bringing warmer and moister air from further north. The low pressure systems that dominated the weather helped to maintain more stable conditions, and when there was a high, we can clearly see how the rise in pressure corresponds with a drop in temperature and dew point. This past winter, much of Alaska experienced warmer than usual temperatures. Much of this was due to El Niño, which originates in the Pacific. Warmer air and sea temperatures move northward with the low pressure systems that develop in the lower latitudes. And as the low pressure systems continue, the winds aloft diverge, allowing the systems to strengthen. These strong low pressure systems were prevalent during the last week of January, as we can see from the satellite images. Southerly winds kept that warmer air moving northward. Sandpoint and Fairbanks both experienced warmer temperatures throughout the winter as a result of this effect. Also, dew point was often in the range of relative humidity, maintaining a significant amount of moisture in the air. Sandpoint is a maritime climate anyway, but Fairbanks, having a continental climate, had relatively high amounts of water vapor present. Maritime climates such as Sandpoint have a tendency to maintain more stable air conditions with low pressure systems. The weather they experience, therefore, also tends to remain more stable. Continental climates such as Fairbanks have a much stronger diurnal cycle and fluctuations with high pressure systems and unstable air that dominate the weather. So variations in the climate are much more pronounced in locations such as Fairbanks, where the unstable air is subject to change. I hope you've enjoyed this screencast, and happy spring to everyone.